Does anybody else have that? So I have two pieces. This is called Highway 1 with the Universe. Highway 1 emerges from the massive behavioral sink of a desert city called Los Angeles and follows a coastline as well as it can. You could put out your cigarette in the sand like a roadside ashtray as you're driving. That's how close the beach is to the road, especially in Malibu. This was my escape route when I was in high school. In 1969, there was a teacher's strike and I hitchhiked up the coast. In Big Sur, I came across an illegal commune of long-haired folks from out of state. They were living under the trees on the edge of a sandy cove. Their plan was to sail up and down the coast of California, trading marijuana in Viking longboats. I'm not sure how that worked out. When I arrived in San Francisco, I left my backpack under a tree and went across the street to look at the ocean. Walking back, I saw a couple of scruffy guys, one of them carrying my backpack. I told him it was mine. He said they wanted to protect it as someone might steal it, and they gave it back. I sat on the sidewalk with the thieves waiting in their car. Maybe they were watching the waves. I went to the Haight where I found a crash pad and spent the night with the next go-go dancer. The next year I had an old bread truck with a bubble on top and a bed and back. I took off with a friend on Highway 1. The truck broke down near Santa Barbara. It threw a rod. The oil gauge didn't work. I had some Hispanic friends there and we caught a ride to San Joaquin Valley. We stayed with a black family which was boarding a mentally retarded kid. He would walk around picking invisible butterflies out of the air. We may have been half out of our minds from LSD and Philosophy 101, or weathering the private warp of going further into our minds, but he was out there, and we weren't about to follow him. Someone drove us to the mountains. We hiked a few miles to a small lake and camped out. The next day we took LSD. I sat in a curving rock formation like it was a power throne with wings of stone and watched a deer pick its way across the rocks. Later I was kneeling at the edge of that pristine mountain lake and could barely touch it with the palm of my hand. There were diamonds of light appearing at my fingertips and radiating lines of force. A trout swam underneath my hand. I was caught up in a lethargic, precious trance. Then I looked over and saw my friend jumping off a rock and doing a cannonball in the lake. One thing about doing acid with others, you see how your minds are wired differently. The next day we hiked back to the main road and caught a ride with a young airline pilot. He was driving a convertible sports car and was intrigued with what we were doing. On other trips, I went to Rough and Ready, a small town in the hills of Northern California. I had a high school friend there with a small ranch. The Yuba River was not far away. I met a girl in the river who was on acid. I had known her for hours before I saw her with any clothes on. She was from Detroit. We were together for a week and then hitchhiked to Mendocino. We were walking by a house on the edge of the cliff, not sure where to sleep. I was playing a flute, and someone on the porch liked the music and invited us to spend the night. The next morning we hitchhiked down Highway 1 to San Francisco and went to City Lights bookstore. I saw a flyer saying Allen Ginsberg and the Cockettes would be performing in Berkeley that night. So we went there. Ginsberg was chanting a William Blake poem, "Merrily, merrily, we welcome in the spring," while people were doing a long snake dance and tripping over our bags on the floor. Back in LA, I knew a guy who had a wall of kilos of marijuana in a shed behind his house. He had a converted school bus and asked me and a friend to paint the word "windfucker" along the side, which we did in Gothic script, except it looked like mindfucker. We hit the road with them heading north, but the bus broke down near Berkeley. The two of us found ourselves at the front gate of the university, not sure what to do, when a young man with long blonde hair approached us and asked if we needed a place to stay. It was a crash pad for runaways in San Francisco. It was a strange place, looking like a storefront full of old furniture, but there were rooms in the back where kids could spend the night or live for a while. When I went into the bathroom, I found the walls were covered with pornographic pictures. There was even a heat lamp that went on when you turned on the light. The place was run by an older black man who would try to get into bed with the runaway kids. He made some overtures with us, but didn't get anywhere. We left the next day. We later rendezvoused with the Windfucker bus for the ride back to LA. There were some witches on the bus who wore nothing under their skirts. They were runaway girls. In Santa Barbara, we got off the freeway to check on my bread truck. The police pulled us over. Drugs were being hidden or disposed of on the way to the station. The runaway girls with no ID were taken away, and we were back on the road in no time. Thank you. This is a fairy tale that I updated, called a modern version of Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, there was an old woman who would kill teenagers and eat them. She lived in Marin, and her home was covered with marijuana plants. When the high school students would come up to her house in the woods to get some pot, she would invite them in, get them stoned, and when they were so high they couldn't see straight, push them into the oven. Considering they were full of THC, it was like making pot brownies, except it was smoked high school students. One day a boy and girl were walking by after school and saw the pot plants all over the house. They walked up and were pulling off leaves when the old lady invited them in for a smoke. The girl was suspicious. She was an honors student who wanted to be a nurse, and this didn't seem quite right. Her boyfriend was a lowlife, but she put up with it because psychosexually she needed to feel like she was slumming in bed or she couldn't come. But that's another story. While her boyfriend was getting high with the old woman, she just pretended to inhale. She wandered around the place, and glancing out the back window, she saw some bones in the hot tub and a baseball cap with the name of her high school on it. She knew something was amiss. Math was her specialty. So she put 2 and 2 together and came up with homicidal stoner cannibal witch. She pretended she was stoned, slowing down her reaction time and not finishing sentences. When the old woman showed Hansel the oven where she dried her marijuana, Gretel realized she meant to remove him from the realm of the living. In other words, to perform a Hanselectomy. Gretel had spent too much time on the behavioral modification of her stoner boyfriend to lose him now. So she was only protecting her investment when she pushed the old woman into the oven, slammed the door, and cooked her goose. The boyfriend was shocked out of his mind. "That's elder abuse," he said. And in fact, the girl was arrested. But since she was a minor, she only did a year in the juvenile detention center. The boyfriend smoked all of the old woman's pot and became permanently spaced out, so he moved to Bolinas. Thank you.